Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are, let's see, the beginning of May 2nd already of 2025, and I am here today with Daniel Clayman. Before we get started with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about AACG. We have a really great group with us today. And for those of you that haven't visited our Fired Up program before, we do these programs on the first Friday of every month. They're free and open to the public. So if you follow AACG on Instagram or Facebook, or go to our website and sign up for our emails, you can stay on top of all of our programming, and you'll also see it on the front page of the website. If you're not a member of AACG and would like to join, we actually have exclusive member programming the other 3 weeks of the month, and all of those go into a private video library for our members on the website that you can access through our member portal. So Howard will put the link in the chat if you would like to join. And now I'd like to get on with the program. I'm so thrilled to have Daniel Clayman with us today. He is really an icon in glass and got into glass actually back in the 1980s. So he has really grown and evolved over that period of time and is going to share with us today some of his both architectural work as well as his smaller sculptures. And I think specifically focusing in on an incredible public art installation he did recently in Toledo called Ripple. And before we get to that, I also want to thank our sponsors. We have two wonderful sponsors for the program today. The first sponsor is SURF, the Craft Emergency Relief Fund. And they provide craft artists with support and resources for disaster and emergency relief, education programs, and readiness grants to strengthen preparedness. Committing to generosity, inclusion, and care, we advocate for the thrivability of craft artists and craft as an art form. This commitment is central to their vision of an equitable, thriving, and supportive craft community. They know that they can't do everything for everyone, but they are determined to do their best at what they can do and support the work of others in this community as we advocate together for the ability of craft artists to thrive. And AACG also provides with a grant every year. So we really feel strongly about this organization and hope that you will give them some support as well. Our second sponsor is Rago. Rago Wright is pleased to be a regular sponsor of the AACG and its programs and believes it's a wonderful way to connect with the contemporary glass community. It's their 15th year offering glass and dedicated sessions on the secondary market. They could not have done it without AACG's encouragement and support, and likewise, the AACG is very grateful for Rago's support as well. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and have Daniel start the program. So please go ahead. You're muted, Daniel.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. I got lots of stuff to show you. I'm just really happy to be here. And I want to just start out by saying that for the last few years, when my friends say, hey, what's going on in the studio? As a studio artist, I'm wandering the desert right now. I'm certainly confused and wondering what I want to, not wondering, formulating, because I'm working on what I want to do next and show next. So, but meanwhile, there's been just tons of other stuff happening, and I want to give you a little tour. So since 1981, I've worked with a material that can't be conquered, it must be coaxed, and sometimes it can't even be coaxed. So as a glass caster, this is the only technical detail I'm going to give you. As a glass caster, we're always fighting devitrification. Glass is a vitreous substance, which means it flows at a certain rate at a certain temperature, like honey at like a soda lime glass. Honey, that would be 70 degrees, might be at 1400 degrees glass. So I just want to show you, this was a piece that devitrified during its casting. And because devitrification can lead to failure, I wanted to just show you sometimes what we got to do
Camera
here.
number one. Oh, we're gonna go from heavy to light, and light to heavy. And camera number one.
Can you hear the audio on the video?
That
I could at first, I thought, and then now it stopped.
joint held. So why are we doing this? This section has divot cracks, and I don't even want to put it in the backyard should it fall and kill one of the dogs. Good glue joints.
So this was cast in parts. You wouldn't even know it if you saw it, but it was all glued together. The glue joints never break,
Because the hitting here.
even with this craziness.
Right there. Into where the cracks were. Oh, wow.
So that's devitrification.
That's wild. Isn't that wild?
So I wanted to just say about devitrification. It's an important part of what I do technically, understanding devitrification and using it. The reason I put this slide, this is of Corey Pemberton, the organizer of Crafting the Future, is one of the things that's going on in the glass scene, I would say for the last decade and maybe even more, is really a move towards including the underrepresented in all different ways. And I think academia has done especially a good job. And people like Corey, Pearl Dick in Chicago has a lot of kids at risk. There's just so much going on besides artwork in the glass scene, and I'm thrilled. I want to show you these quick maps. Glass at some time with the pharaohs of Egypt was more valuable than gold. And so here's the world 3000 BC. Somebody in the desert, somewhere in the Mideast says, oh my God, lightning struck, it melted the sand, there's something to this. So I just want to, this is a very brief view of glass exploding around the world. Here's some early glass, 4000 BC up to 100 AD. And you can see how crazy in that 4,000 years things have improved. This particular, there you go. This is a cast piece from 1436 BC. This guy. And the Roman cage cup, now I'm comparing to Carla Trinkley in 1994. So that's 4 centuries, 6 centuries actually later. Figure of Venus, Roman Empire, and then Harvey Littleton. The figure of Venus, that glass is weathering over time and it's beginning to fall apart. And then we have Dante with the crazy modern twist on the Latticino. So glass comes to America in the 1600s to Jamestown. Here's the little reproduction furnace. Every bottle had to be handmade. Glass goes north to New England, spreads west to Ohio. What does everything have in common? Trees to burn for the furnaces and sand to melt glass. So you head west, and now we're in the 60s and 70s. You can see we're in Oregon for bullseyes, and we're at Pilchuck. We're in Mexico much earlier than that, obviously. And along came Pilchuck. But the reason I wanted to show this map is this shows free trade around the world. This is not only the spread of the techniques, this is the spread of commerce and, how shall I say this gently? Tariffs have always been part of the world economy. If you read about the tariffs in 1600 for glass going around the world, it was massive. And one of the things we do best as glass artists is we have a pretty open communication. And except maybe for the time when you couldn't get out of Murano if you were, you were kind of prisoned there with your family. So anyway, this map represents politics of centuries about how the world works best together. I was studying casting through the 80s, and the Lubinskis, love this slide of them. And then I love these pieces, I just love. And these are the people I were looking at. I love this image. I have never met Elena, but this piece is kiln cast and it's really phenomenal. And Bertil, of course, was casting. And Howard Bentre was here in Rhode Island. So as RISD students, we visited his studio. So I just show these as these were the people really breaking some serious ground. And then Karen Lamont comes along at some point, and she blows open the kiln casting thing with this type of work.
Excuse me, can I mention something?
Please.
Did you mention that, who cast this, pieces of Le Monde?
Oh, they're mostly cast in the Czech Republic at
Yes,
Lohotsky's.
by Vygotsky.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yes.
because I think it's very important to mention, because if you talk about techniques and how they develop, or, how fantastic, people are, that I think, it's very important to mention who, because, they help us after that, to make like these pieces, yes?
I'm going to hit that in my section on the fabricators. Okay, so what's happened over this last crazy couple decades is now we're in performance art. That's a costume, a glass costume. Anna Myslowski. And Katja Isabel Filmus is a fantastic artist from Tel Aviv. And this is, omphaloskepsis. Navel gazing is what that means.
Omphaloskepsis.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Katja.
Thank you, Dan.
And I just love this, navel gazing. Matt Saw's Crazy Inflatables, really pushing the material. Justin Ginsberg teaches at UT Arlington. Beautiful work. Can everybody see the connection to Tutzinski's work here? Threads, very different use. And then Sharon O'Mara, who ran the Tyler program for a long time. This is a Photoshop amalgamation of her dog's saliva on a window. And now through photo manipulation, it looks like a chandelier. And the art world at large discovers the contemporary glass movement using foundries and fabricators. And this is where I would say where the foundries, the glass people, what's the Lohotsky's foundry called? Anybody know quick? Anyway. So artists have now discovered, wow, I don't have to build my own kilns or even learn how to cast glass. This is Josiah McElhaney, who is a master glass blower, but he firmly resides in the fine art world. Kiki Smith had this done, and I believe it was done in Germany. Rauschenberg had this done by Dan Spitzer. I think they did this at Urban. And I made this broom for Rauschenberg's Guggenheim retrospective in '97. So the image is stolen from the Combine, but he gave me the broom that they swept the stoop at the New York studio forever. And in 2022, I worked with an artist named Hannah Levy to do the most difficult project I'd ever done. And I was the one who slumped this glass to fit. So she gave me a rough of this armature. We made a bunch of molds and through a crazy process, slumped this to fit on it. So my path.
Sherry.
Can you hear this flute music? Good. So I just want to play it for a second. So
Now
that,
I can't hear.
excuse me?
I can't hear any music.
Oh, well, anyway, I was playing a Bach sonata in A minor.
Uh,
It's the piece I was working on in 1980. This is my flute teacher. I just looked her up this morning, and she is into DEI work as a composer and as a performer. So she's very much about diversity, equity, inclusion. The reason I bring this up, it's the reason I'm an artist and not a musician. Claudia said to me one day, "How's it going?" And I said, "I'm having trouble with my duet partner. I don't hear like he does." And she said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "What do you mean you know?" And she said, "I hope you're not going to become a musician for a profession. You're a wonderful student. You work harder than anybody I know, but you're no natural musician." So that's partly why I am a visual artist. Oh, darn. I didn't even know I had a landline plugged in anymore. So why do I show this picture? When I went to Penland in 1980, 81, every day I would go practice this music, and every day at 5:30. And every day I would go to dinner and somebody would say, "Did you hear that music?" And I never, ever, ever said it was me. I was a very shy performer. But when I went back there in 1999, my parents had both passed. I had kids. I'm married now. When I first went there, I was a single guy with parents. I go back there and I go back without my flute, and I realize that the light on January 13th in 1981, if it's at 4:30 or 5:30, is the same on January 13th, 2000, whatever, if it's a clear day. That is a sensory input to me. That's a memory. It kicked a memory off. I sat in the pews, crying like a baby, thinking about my parents. But it was clued by the light. On the left is me at a Rhinebeck craft show where Josh Simpson, who I know is on the call, took me and my buddy Ed Branson, and we were some of the demonstrating glass blowers. And on the right is how I appeared at Penland. And Penland has been a very important place to me. This is now the studio I work in. This is my main studio in a big, beautiful studio that we built. We bought a building and outfitted. So you can see I enjoy having lots of projects going on at once. And this is what it looks like out of the skylight in my studio in the winter. So there's wonder everywhere. Introduction. This is my family. My parents got married right when my father got home from the war. They met dancing and were married 6 months later, and my brother was born 9 months later. So I'm from a family of 6. The oldest brother wasn't there. And they're the Pooches and my family. I have twin daughters that are now, for those of you who know me, they're now 35. So my father, one of the biggest things for him in the world was his time in World War II. He was stationed in the Solomon Islands on an air base, and he got malaria and went to Auckland, New Zealand. And this is his room card from his leave. And this is how I found what building was the Hotel Auckland, with the help of the librarian at the Auckland Public Library. So this to me is like the light on the floor at Penland. It's a sensory input where I walked around here for hours, and I stood where my father had stood in 1944, which is crazy to me. My first, I'm not going to say my first. I was born a maker. I was always doing something fun, making something. And I was always interested in anything my mother would offer us up. So she took us to see Peter Pan at the Wilbur Theater. I could see backstage from where we were sitting, and I couldn't believe what that was, that you could suspend reality. And that's all I wanted to do. My father bought my mother Steubenware every anniversary, small anniversaries, small pieces, major anniversaries, the big ones. So this was what I was doing in theater in the 70s and early 80s. I did a lot of rock and roll. This is 2 summers with the Cars, Journey, Sister Sledge. And then I was a designer and electrician at the dance festival, the American Dance Festival, and worked at a bunch of theaters. But along the way, let's see here. Nope, that's right. Okay. This is the first glass piece I ever made. As the master electrician at Long Wharf Theater, you have to do anything, even if it's a prop, if it has electricity to it. The director's prompt was, I want these soldiers to warm their hands on the campfire at the beginning of the act. So it had to be dark. As the lights come up a little bit, the campfire comes up. That's slumped glass over kiln bricks that's then been painted orange and red and black, and with a light bulb in back of it. So this is me, probably 1980 on the road somewhere up on the left corner at my lighting console. This is me barely a year and a half later. When I was in my theater days, I took a glass blowing class. Those of you know who Jose Chartier, he was a senior and he taught the class. So we've known each other since 1979. And then this was something typical that I was making when I was working at Josh Simpson's to make pocket money. And I went to RISD in '83 and blew a lot of glass. And, you know, these aren't crazy incredible, but pretty decent glass blowing, because I blew glass for like 6 or 7 years, pretty full time. So objects. We're going to start in the 90s and quickly work up. Handled objects. This is what I first showed at the Hellers and at Habitat. These are some of my favorite pieces. This is Osterone, which is, Osterone refers to the bone, but this is a pelvic bone. This is called chirurgus. It's a Greek word for making by hand, but it refers mostly to a surgeon. What this was for me was a material play on the loom shuttle that occurs in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, the birthplace of American industry and specifically textiles. So on the left is basswood, on the center is crystal, and that was hand carved just with little Dremel tool out of a piece of crystal. And on the right is bronze. So mass, delicacy, strength, all of those things come into play on this. In the 90s, I did, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years of pieces like this, and they were so time consuming. I think only 25 of these pieces ever went out into the world. This is when I started having to have employees, because the production of the wax models for bronze and then the wax model for glass, just the wax models alone were 6 to 8 weeks each person. So that's 2 people, 6 to 8 weeks at the wax bench. And we haven't even begun to cast anything. And this was a little bit different play, where this one is talking a little bit more about protection. This is talking a little bit more about the potential of this, quote, water to fill up and flow out the spout. Through the early 2000s into the first decade of the 2000s, I really went back to my lighting thoughts and was making, on the right is a solid beam of glass. And I look at that as if I stole a light beam out of the air. If you think about being in the attic and blowing dust, and a little knothole projects the light, if you blew dust on it, you'd all of a sudden see the shape of the knot. Even folded plane was a similar thought, but really came, of tons of folding paper models. Just tons of stuff where if you fold it here and fold it here, and then unfold it, you get all these planes working in different ways. So the trick to these are over 8 feet tall. The solid beam, very easy to cast. It's an open face mold. And then this is ground hollow a little. This is cast thin. So this is a big casting, only 3/4 of an inch to 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick. And that took us 2 years to get the first one of these through a firing and out, because we would break molds. It was horrible. But this is what that glass looks like in natural light. And this is the size of the molds to produce those pieces. And this is the size of the kiln to melt the glass. There's a couple molds in here of not quite as big as those, but. And in 2013, probably through 18, I made a series of objects that I referred to as lanterns. And they were really something where, again, I was wandering the desert and I needed to keep my hands busy, and I wanted to make something really beautiful that referred back to stupas in Nepal on the way to Everest, which I've never done, but I'm a big fan of Life magazine and have seen these my whole life. So they're just beautiful objects. And these are the large, I had a show called White Light at the Mint Museum that traveled to Tacoma. These were meant to be simply meditations on shape, which is why they're white, because so many times I'd been not only at my exhibitions, but other people's, and somebody would say, I love the form, I hate the color. I love the color, I hate the form. So I wanted to take color out of the equation. However, you will see in pierced volume that there's different colors here. And that's because when I called Bullseye to get the white, I said, I would want you to specifically send me the glass from different melt batches. So this is this, I think, the same chemistry for the color, but using different days production, which gave me the thought, the feeling that the glass was like granite, marble being taken out of the quarry at Carrara, where over that vein would be more pinkish, that vein might be more white. And this is the assembly jig to make pierced volume. Kat's putting the first row up. A couple of the other pieces. And I just love defying what we think about glass, just suspending this. And this is 10 feet tall. This is my lovely wife, Terry, and me at the opening of the Corning wing in front of Circular Object 1. I was very proud to be in that. And I did a show at the Muskegon Museum of Art. And it was, I think we called it Shift. I can't remember. But what it was were objects that I never made a whole series of, except for the blue piece in the middle. So there were these odd objects that I never went and revisited. Hollow Arc was in that show. And one of the last sort of studio objects that I made is this osteohalo, bone circle. We carved each bone and then assembled it, and it's hung like that. And this is what it looks like close up. Stronger than you would think. Projects. So this is Calor. The assignment from here was the cemetery said, we want something quiet and spiritual to honor the deceased in this columbarium, it's called. It's a place where you can put bodies up in a little closet instead of a grave. And my main competitor for this project was a bronze angel holding a baby. And I was so pleased that the board, which was very conservative, said, you know what, let's go with this abstract symbol. And it is an abstract symbol of continuity, life force and continuity. The prompt here was the client said, I just love your work. I want something in the living room. So keep in mind when I talk about the boulders, because for this project, this is in Concord, Mass. And when you look outside, it looks like George Washington could gallop down the hill on his horse with a bunch of guys. And so I was outside, and what I thought I would do was take a boulder, take molds of it, and then unfold it and put it up on the wall flat. I love the idea. It was way too expensive to do it. So I came up with this idea to take advantage of the sun. So all day long, the piece is not just about the glass. The piece is about how the sun works with the glass and changes what's going on in the wall. So where Cat is sort of east, and where we are is west. So the wall, the window wall is facing due north, I guess. So the sun just comes right over and changes all day long. And this is how we put it up. That's a genie hoist, it's called. So we got it situated with some janky jigging and then hung it and then lowered the genie hoists. I will say the wife, Deb, she got a little freaked out by the amount of equipment we had to bring in into her house, but we protected it. As you can see, this is when we're almost done. We pulled the wall protection, but everything was covered with plywood and styrofoam. Straight circular object was commissioned. The prompt there was Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee was building a new headquarters. They wanted a place to gather. Line form shadow, paper, and cable at the Fuller Museum. When I walked out of this gallery, I said, this has to be made in glass. The whole reason I went to paper is I didn't want to struggle with glass. So I saw it in paper. I said, wow, I got to do this. So I went to a professor at Brown University who ran the Granoff Center and said, hey, let's do a thing. And he right away said, yep, let's do it. And this piece was in place for Brown's 250th graduation. I just want to mention that part of what I'm looking at is this is not only the glass as a lens, but all of that light coming through and shining on the wall, it becomes a color field painting and it changes through the day. This is 2017 at Mass College of Art. I was teaching there as an adjunct professor, and an opportunity came up to do a project. So the year after that first gig, I taught a class on building a project, and this is what we did. 10,000 raindrops hung in a Roman arch. Until 2 days before the installation started, it was a Gothic arch. But then I was told we couldn't come down low enough to make that proportion. They were really, all of a sudden somebody shows up in my lab and says, oh, by the way, you can't go below 14 feet. Truth be known, I went to the provost and I said to the provost, I got to come down to 12 feet. And he says, what's 2 feet between friends? Just do it. Another view. And then somewhere during that time, I got introduced to the head curator at Grounds for Sculpture in Hamilton, New Jersey. He took me around, offered me a bunch of different galleries, and then we walked into this building and he said, this is where I want all Clayman. And this is what was there. This is the afternoon we visited. There was not a digital architectural file. So I used the drawings and went and surveyed it and turned it into this digital model. So this is the real thing. And there's my model that I had. So this is what I began thinking about. Another rendering looking up, looking down from the balcony. And this is a nice view of a single pane. This shows what I did. I did 2 panes. So this was the radiant landscape, and this was, I called it the contra curve, the curve against the plane. So these tools of computer rendering are super helpful, especially at the architectural scale. And then this is what I made, 28 feet by 47 feet, 28 feet tall though. 4,000 panes of glass, 16,000 rivets. It was crazy. This is to emulate underwater, but also the painter Yves Klein Blue. This is as close as I could find. What I like better about Yves Klein Blue is that he stole from his employer when he worked at an art store. He stole from his employer. He stole pigments because he couldn't get a blue enough. So he stole a bunch of pigments. And this is a little bit of putting it up. Here. Yeah, this is a minute time lapse. We'll just look at this. Just jumped ahead for a time. So you can see it was a month with 6 of us working every day, 12 hours, 7 days a week. We had a blast. We really did. Had all our meals together. It was one of those things. So I'm on a landscape job in Brookline, Mass with a landscape architect, and they're schlepping all these beautiful big boulders off. And I said, wow, those are nice. The landscape contractor says, if you want a boulder, come to my boulder farm in Connecticut and I'll give you one. So he gave me a boulder. I made molds of it during a residency at Tyler School of Glass. Thank you, Tyler, because my prompt for the residency was, you don't have to teach. You're going to be here 1 week a month for the year. And you have to give a lecture on Wednesdays at noon, on the Wednesday at noon, anything you want. But the big prompt was, you can't make anything you've made before. So I made these, and I specifically made the gold one during that, most of the gold one during that residency. But then I got into this thing about the earth, the landscape, minerals from the earth. And when I put the gold one together, kind of hot glued together almost, I saw that you couldn't see it the way I wanted it because there was too much light coming through with no metal. So I put gold leaf on the inside, and much better. You could really see it. And then I went back and made a silver and a gold. The silver is actually white gold because the silver leaf looked like aluminum foil. And this is Color, which was commissioned for a foundation down in New Orleans, and it is all bronze. This was installed summer of 23. And let's just look a little at this video. We don't have quite enough time. Yeah, here it is. Let me just see what we might. I want you to see the studio part. Ah, good. There's the presentation model to the computer, to the plastic parts foundry in Maine. So these are all the parts that the foundry then welded together. And then we brought it back to the studio. Oops. Well, let's see if I could just find this part, because it's pretty interesting how we changed the whole surface. There it is. Anyway, lots of patina work, lots of hammering the surface. Around 2018, I've always taught. I taught workshops and I've been adjunct all over the place. But I got a call from the president of University of the Arts, had heard about me through Brian Efren, one of the glass collectors who was on his board, and asked me if I would consider coming to the university to build a program that had been very small. So I said, sure, I'd love to. This is the main building back in the 1800s, maybe even 1700s. This is it. This is a blackboard on annealing and glass properties. There's the professor. Most people don't know that I still blow glass sometimes. And this was our studio. That is the whole studio. You're sitting at the bench. That's it. It was in a shed outside. And I was tasked with designing a new studio. And then I don't know what happened, but the whole thing fell apart. And then COVID came, and then the school closed permanently last year. Sad, but I had an amazing 3 years, including teaching on Zoom during COVID. One of the best parts of that job was administering the Borowski Prize. Herb Borowski and Laurie Wagman sponsored it. And Sarah Breland was the first winner when I was at 218. And Simone Fieser was 2019. And it was really fun as part of the job to be tooling around with these people. And there's my students. Fred Call came. Here's this. These are all individual castings that we made while we worked. So they were poured and then put onto his, and in student situations, people sometimes turn annealers off by mistake. All of his work exploded. So here's a little gizmo. Centrifugal casting glass, that's how you get this dish shape. Put it in, you spin it at a certain rate, and it will dish like that. Cooper O'Brien did a great mold blowing demo. I'm showing these not out of nostalgia, but to just keep showing you how many different ways there are to work this crazy material. We were doing face impressions in sand. So this wonderful student, she posed for this, but did a really nice face impression. You take the cellophane off and then you pour the hot glass in. I'm cruising around the ceramic studio on crits one morning, and this is a student's ceramic drapery, and I thought of Karen Lamont's right away. So this is porcelain that's about to be put into the kiln to be fired. And my one student, this is the last glass student at UArts. Thinking, what am I thinking about? Oh, thinking about orbital traces. I'm thinking about the tendency of things to get into space and all sorts of space junk. Like one of Edward White, he was the first American spacewalker. One of his spare gloves went out of the Gemini space capsule and is still spinning around the Earth to this day. So I wanted to make something that talked about stuff that just keeps going around. This is to be 18 feet in diameter. So I designed this truss system so the whole thing could be trucked in sections, if you can see my hands, about this big. It all gets bolted together, the whole frame. The frame gets lifted off the floor, lets sit for a day or two, and then you can bolt the glass on. And here is the 3D model. It's a working model. And here's the retention screw up onto this boss. And that's its proportions. These people are 6 feet tall. I'm getting towards done. I think I'm good. Am I good for a few more minutes? Yeah. Kier Glass Foundry. I worked with Michael Shiner back in the 80s and 90s. Mike, and I don't work with him anymore, but he got such a big job. He asked me if I would put my hat back on and come back and work with him. This is a private dining club in New York City that every wall, every vertical surface in the dining room is sheathed in 23,000 pounds of architectural cast glass. These are the graphite molds we designed, some of the parts, jigging. Here's the place raw. We're beginning to put some glass up. And this is done. They've opened this week. So all of this is cast glass, everything. And mirrored. Every piece is mirrored. And that's how big of a crew it was to make it. Okay, here I am, Ashley Federal Courthouse, First Contact, 2018. And I had just finished the 2 big projects, and I got a call from them to say, hey, we're looking at your work. I was like, this is right where I want to be. Here's the lobby I was presented with. And this is what I designed for it, with the idea that the architect's brief on the building has always been the transparency of the law. So I wanted to put this scrim in to expand on that. And I wanted to show you, because of this computer modeling component, how easy it is to switch from a line drawing to a rendering through the computer. Saves hours upon hours. And this is a little technicality of these shingles. By plugging this design into a computer program, it can tell me exactly where the center of gravity would be to hang this detail. Each one would hang perfectly. So the first building got pitched because of budget constraints, and cost of materials skyrocketed. And the feds, the GSA said to the court system, we need to go back and rework this. The budget's too high. So it went to a different architect. And this is when in 2020-21, I got the call to come back. And I said, I'd love to come back. So this is the renderings they gave me. And then COVID normalized. So we never traveled for weekly meetings. That all happened on Zoom. I went back and looked at UArts. And then this is the view. This is for years. I'm looking at these computer pictures because I'm not flying during COVID. And so this was one of the ideas I had, but the architect said, that's going to block my beautiful skylight. Okay. So as I'm working along, I find I'm trying to localize the project. And I found out that prairie grass, which is called tall prairie grass or prairie grass tall, used to start 25 miles west of Toledo. And that for me was enough to locate it. So I wanted to, instead of the project from Mass Art, which was so architectural, I wanted to introduce my idea as a lyrical, gentle, undulating form that would allow you to come out of your courtroom stressful day. At this particular court, you're generally not there for a happy reason. We're not going to do your adoption there, for instance. So that's how this came to be. So these are just different viewpoints. The drop assembly, this is the same type of drop that I used to make for Josh Simpson in 1981. And I love nothing more than to make drops. It thrills me. This is the way the ribbon worked or looked. This is just, hadn't even figured out the drop concentration, but now I took away the plane and put in the glass and the wires, and you could begin to see this. Now I took the building away. And if you can see this, this is probably 8 feet of drops width. That got changed. So the building started going up. I visited every once in a while. This is my area before it was sheathed in. This is my GSA supervisor, Mike Finn. And if he's here, I just want to say, best person I've worked with on a big project, just really on top of it. This is the studio mock-up for them to see that all my stuff was working. And then I'm not exaggerating, probably 100 drawings over the time of everything had to be shown. How is it going to interface with the gypsum, with the plywood? And there were just problems every which way. One of the things I always had to submit were load charts and amount of things I'm going to put up charts. So you can see at some point this was huge, 25,000, 9,000, it was crazy. Ended up being 2,700 and change. This is a load chart. This is one of the reflecting ceiling plans of one scheme. I'm just showing you this because this is what it takes. My bench, making custom hardware. We file it. It's a regular acorn nut. Drill it out and paint it. There's the painting on the right. There's Ruby installing. There's a computer view. Same real view. Computer view, same real view. This is the guys installing it. We had these templates where they just put all these holes in with a templated thing. So this is the morning we started. And this is the afternoon 7 days later. Again, it's supposed to provide the users of the court with a little bit of mellow, like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. Oh, look at that. And this is what I'm beginning with. I'm getting on to the next iteration of the boulders, and they're all generated from small boulder models of plaster. And thanks again to Surf. Thanks again to Rago. And thank you very much for Art Alliance for having me. If there's time for questions, I'm happy to stay.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Really such a pleasure to have you on the program today. Really fascinating. You have such a diverse array of work that you do, not only in terms of your vision, but as you were showing us with the techniques that you are able to incorporate in each project. It seems to differ so much. And so it seems like a constant learning process, which I'm sure keeps it interesting as well as very challenging.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of questions, I did see one coming in that someone was asking if you worked with Hextall, and I'm not sure which project that was relating to.
I work with two glues for you glue nerds. I use Hextall, and I use products from Epoxy Technology, which is online at Epotech, EPOTEK.
Okay, great. Thank you. And what do you have coming up? I mean, it seems like life is never quiet for you, so I'm sure you have something in the works soon.
Well, I'm going to Pilchuck tomorrow.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to the gas conference. And I just was working on a job with Bose Speaker. I wasn't supposed to tell you that, but then the job got canceled because like so many big companies, they're holding off on tariff situations
Is local, Concord.
just to see what they're doing. And I'll tell you what I'm doing is now I have time in the studio to work.
Wonderful.
And what I'm doing now is not booking a show until the work is pretty much done, because what stresses me out is working against show deadlines. What I'd rather do is come up with a body of work and call my buddy Lou Wexler and say, hey, Lou, let's have a show. And he's going to say, dude, that's 2 years away till I can fit you in. And I'll say, that's what I have to do if I don't want to be working against deadlines.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we do have a question from a younger artist that wants to know if you have any advice for younger artists trying to get into architectural glass from smaller scale glasswork.
Don't be stupid. That's what I'd say. Be careful. It's so here's a great example. The federal project, First Contact 2018, final installation and photography 2025. That's 7 years of a project that only took me about 7 months to make, beginning to end. 7 intense months, but it certainly didn't need 7 years. So
one thing
in all seriousness, you just keep adding to what you're doing.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, Dan, one of the things that I heard come up as you were talking about the projects was the number of changes that tend to come up as you deal with unexpected things along the way. And how much of a learning curve has it been in terms of budgeting that into your cost for the project, so you aren't kind of, underbidding to get the project and then finding that there are so many complications or unexpected events arising that it ends up coming in much more expensive than you realized?
Okay, I love the question. It's a really good question. My budget was given to me. That's all there was to it. This is what you can do. So I had to work towards the budget. What was surprising to me was the amount of changes that happened that I had to respond to, or that our end of the team didn't even know, meaning the GSA team, maybe the communication wasn't as great as it should have been with the on-the-ground contractors. So I'll tell you one thing that was crazy. Originally, this was supposed to be 8,000 drops, extending all the way to the window. But one day I got a call that said, we just noticed a piece of HVAC got redesigned, an air handler. And I used to call the area right above the stairs as the most important part of the sculpture, because it was a canopy as you walked up. And it was going to be too much money to move the air handler back to where it was supposed to be. So I had to redesign the project. And as it was, I think it was all good, because I wanted to be under the skylight. The architect didn't want me under the skylight, Sam. So actually, we went in between the skylight and where I was supposed to be. And then it's worth mentioning that for the longest time, I was told I couldn't have man lifts on the mezzanine because of weight issues. So for my GSA friends, I'm talking a little out of school as a joke, but I was there one day and I said, how come they can have man lifts up here and I can't? And that kind of freed the whole thing up. And everybody was day to day great to work with, but there are inherent frustrations on bigger projects. Michael Shiner's architectural casting, the prompt there was architectural casting. It had to be done in 11 months. Like, don't fool with us. So that's an answer to that. Do the best you can all the time.
Yeah, yeah. How do you deal with insurance on the large projects?
I'm required to have insurance bond. And so I think, you know, any business, it's easy to get $1 million bond, a liability bond. So I have product liability, installation liability, building everything, and I carry $2 million. And you have to prove it to the client. Like every year, the certificate of insurance has to be updated.
Okay.
So I do everything by the books.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It's just been such a pleasure to have you on the program, and really thrilled to be able to share this with our members. For those of us that are with us that are not yet AACG members, I encourage you to visit aacgglass.org. We have Zoom programs every Friday, and they archive into our digital library on the website. So when you're a member, you get a password and you can go in there and have access to hundreds of videos about glass art. I'm going to stop the recording now, and that'll give you a chance to unmute yourself and just talk to Dan directly. So thank you again, Dan. Such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thanks for taking the time out of the Habitat Day.